The Galactic Council had been watching Earth for years. From their position in the far reaches of space, they had observed humanity's rapid rise in technology, the expansion of their knowledge, and the discovery of new energy sources. At first, they had dismissed Earth as nothing more than another primitive planet, a minor speck in the vastness of the galaxy. But as Earth's technological advancements began to grow at an alarming rate, the Council began to worry. The people of Earth were becoming a threat. The Council, made up of representatives from the most powerful and advanced species in the galaxy, had a singular purpose: to maintain order and control. They were tasked with ensuring that no single species could upset the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. For centuries, they had kept the peace, controlling resources and managing conflicts. They believed that every species had its place, and that no one could rise too high, too fast. But Earth was different. The humans were unpredictable. They had shown an ability to adapt, innovate, and overcome every obstacle in their path. They had survived wars, natural disasters, and even self-inflicted crises. They had advanced their technology beyond what the Council had expected, and with each breakthrough, the humans became a greater threat to the established order of the galaxy. The Council had gathered to discuss how to handle this growing threat. Their leaders sat in a grand chamber on a massive space station, surrounded by holographic displays of the galaxy. They knew that Earth could not be allowed to continue unchecked. If humanity was allowed to advance any further, they would become too powerful, and the balance of power in the galaxy would be destroyed. "Earth is a threat," said the voice of the Arctari, a race known for their cold logic and calculating minds. "Their technology is growing exponentially. We cannot let them continue to develop unchecked." The voice of the Zorax, a species of highly intelligent beings with a networked consciousness, chimed in. "We must act quickly. If we do nothing, they will surpass us. We have already seen how easily they adapt to our technology. If left to their own devices, humanity will become the dominant species in this sector." The Council murmured in agreement, their concerns mounting. They knew they could not allow Earth to continue growing without interference, but they were divided on how to handle the situation. Some believed they should send a warning, a show of force to keep Earth in check. Others believed that the humans needed to be eliminated before they could pose a true threat. After all, a planet that had once been nothing more than a small, insignificant world in the galaxy now had the potential to change everything. The leader of the Council, a tall being with shimmering blue skin and glowing eyes, stood to speak. "The time has come to act. We will not allow Earth to become a threat. The humans must be taught a lesson. It is time to show them who truly holds power in the galaxy." The plan was simple. The Council would send a fleet of their most advanced warships to Earth, overwhelming the planet with their superior technology. The humans had no chance against their might. The fleet would strike quickly, destroying key cities, crippling the human governments, and showing the people of Earth that their rise had been nothing more than a brief flash in the pan. Once Earth had been brought to its knees, the Council would offer them a deal. They would be allowed to exist, but only under the Council's rule. The fleet was assembled, and the invasion was set into motion. Ships from every corner of the galaxy, each more powerful than the last, began their journey toward Earth. The Council had made their decision, and they were confident in their success. The humans, after all, were still primitive in comparison to the galaxy's most advanced species. As the fleet neared Earth, their commanders began to prepare. Captain Rin, a seasoned veteran of many battles, stood at the helm of the flagship. He was confident in their superiority. "The humans won't know what hit them," he muttered to himself as he watched the stars streak by on the view screen. The other ships in the fleet were already in position, ready to strike. They would overwhelm Earth's defenses with ease, neutralizing any resistance before it had a chance to organize. The Council had no doubt that their superior technology would crush the humans in mere hours. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, they began to deploy their forces. The first wave of ships fired their weapons, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. The ground shook, and the sky was filled with brilliant explosions. Humanity's greatest cities crumbled in an instant, their once towering skyscrapers reduced to rubble. The humans had no defense against the might of the Council. But as the fleet continued their assault, something unexpected happened. The energy readings from Earth began to shift. At first, the Council commanders dismissed it as a glitch in their sensors. But the readings grew stronger, more intense. The power emanating from Earth was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. Captain Rin stood frozen at his console, staring at the strange readings. "What is that?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. "These energy levels. They don't make sense." The Council's fleet had planned for every possible outcome. They had prepared for every contingency, except this one. The humans had always been unpredictable, but they had never expected this. The planet seemed to be fighting back, sending out a pulse of energy that was not only powerful, but also disrupting their technology. Their ships began to malfunction, their weapons misfiring, their systems shutting down. "What in the universe is going on?" Captain Rin muttered under his breath. The Council's plan had just hit a wall. Something had changed. The humans were not as helpless as they had once thought. And now, they were beginning to realize they might have made a terrible mistake. The fleet of the Galactic Council continued its assault on Earth, but the unexpected energy surge was growing stronger. The once confident commanders were now uneasy, watching in disbelief as their sophisticated weaponry and advanced systems malfunctioned one by one. The once feared ships of the Council, designed to conquer planets with ease, were struggling to maintain control. The humans, who had seemed so insignificant in the vastness of the galaxy, were now causing real problems. Captain Rin stood at the front of his command deck, his eyes locked on the screens. The energy readings from Earth were unlike anything he had ever encountered. "How could this be?" he muttered, his voice filled with frustration. "We've studied Earth for years. They don't have the technology to do this." The screens in front of him showed the vast blue planet below, surrounded by the fleet's warships. Earth was being bombarded from space, cities reduced to rubble in a matter of minutes. Yet, amidst the chaos, something was happening on the planet's surface, something that the Council couldn't explain. Every time the fleet launched another attack, the strange energy from Earth would spike. The energy waves were disrupting their systems, making their weapons useless. It was almost as if the planet itself was fighting back against the invasion, pushing back with a force that seemed to come from deep within its core. The Council's warships had never experienced anything like it. "We need to adapt, now," shouted one of the Council's top engineers, a Zorax known as Lyran. He had spent years studying human technology and believed that understanding it was the key to victory. "This energy it's not just defensive. It's sentient. It's learning. The more we attack, the stronger it gets." Rin's eyes widened in shock. The thought that the energy on Earth might be alive hadn't crossed his mind. He had assumed it was a primitive defensive mechanism, something that could be overwhelmed with superior force. But now, it seemed that Earth was no longer just defending itself. The energy was evolving, adapting in ways that no one, not even the greatest minds of the Galactic Council, had anticipated. As the fleet struggled to regain control, Lyran suggested a new course of action. "We must send a ground force to Earth. We need to understand this energy up close, study it while it's still manageable. If we don't, we could lose everything." Reluctantly, Captain Rin agreed. There was no choice. The situation was deteriorating fast, and they needed answers. He issued the command to prepare for a ground invasion, deploying their best soldiers to the planet's surface. The Council's elite strike force, known for their ruthlessness and precision, would be the ones to uncover the secrets of Earth's energy. The soldiers landed in the wreckage of a once proud city, now nothing more than a smoldering ruin. As they advanced through the rubble, they were met with silence, an eerie, unnatural stillness that hung in the air. It was as though the very planet had become alive, watching them, waiting for them to make their next move. "What's the plan, Captain?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice low and tense. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "We move forward," Rin ordered, his voice cold. "We find the source of this energy and neutralize it. Fast. We cannot afford any more delays." The soldiers advanced, their weapons at the ready, scanning their surroundings for any sign of resistance. But as they moved deeper into the city, they began to notice something strange. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive. It wasn't just the energy readings. They could feel it. The air was thick with something, a presence that made their skin crawl. The soldiers moved cautiously, their eyes darting from side to side. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as though the city itself was holding its breath, waiting. The walls around them seemed to shift, and the ground began to tremble ever so slightly. "Keep moving," Rin ordered, trying to maintain control over his growing sense of unease. But even he couldn't ignore the strange sensation that something was watching them, something far more intelligent than anything they had encountered in the galaxy. Then, without warning, the ground erupted beneath their feet. A massive surge of energy exploded from the earth, sending shockwaves through the air. The soldiers were thrown back, some of them crashing into the rubble, others scrambling to stay on their feet. It was as if the planet itself had decided to strike back. "Get up! Get up!" Rin shouted, pulling himself to his feet. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked around, trying to assess the situation. The soldiers were disoriented, but they were alive. "What the hell just happened?" one of the soldiers gasped, wiping the dust from his face. "The planet is fighting back," Rin muttered, his mind racing. This was no simple defense mechanism. This wasn't a planet that had been pushed to the brink. This was something far more complex, far more dangerous. The energy surges were growing more intense, the ground cracking open beneath their feet. The soldiers could hear distant roars echoing through the city, an unearthly sound that made their blood run cold. It wasn't just the planet fighting back. It was something else, something that had been awakened. Rin's team had come to Earth with one mission, to understand the source of the strange energy. But now, it was clear that they had underestimated humanity and the true power of the planet. The ground beneath them was no longer their ally. It was a battlefield, and Earth was taking the fight to them. The Council's plan was unraveling before their eyes. The fear that had once been confined to whispers among the Council now began to feel real. Humanity wasn't just a threat because of their technology. They were a threat because they had tapped into something ancient, something far beyond what the Council had ever imagined. And now, Earth's secrets were beginning to unfold, one terrifying discovery at a time. As Rin stood there, watching the chaos unfold around him, he realized the truth. The monsters the Council had feared were not the humans. They were something far worse. And the Council, in their arrogance, had no idea what they had just unleashed. The ground trembled under their feet again, as Rin and his team scrambled to regain their footing. The energy surges were increasing in frequency, now accompanied by violent tremors that seemed to reverberate from deep within the planet itself. It was no longer just an atmosphere of strange tension. It was as though Earth was coming alive, fighting back with a force that had been buried for centuries. The air was thick with a strange energy, electric and oppressive, pressing in from all sides. "Captain, we can't stay here," one of the soldiers yelled over the rumble of the shifting earth. "If we don't pull back, we'll be buried." Rin hesitated. His instincts told him to retreat, to pull his team back to safety and report to the fleet. But deep down, he knew that something significant was unfolding here, something that no one had anticipated. This was not just a planetary defense system. It was a living force. They were standing at the edge of a discovery that would change everything. "Stay in formation. We need to find the source of this energy," Rin barked, his voice sharp despite the creeping doubt gnawing at his mind. He wasn't sure if it was courage or sheer desperation that kept him pushing forward. "We need answers before we make any moves." As they continued into the heart of the city's ruins, the unnatural vibrations underfoot grew stronger, the air pulsating with an eerie hum that seemed to come from the very ground. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, gripping their weapons tighter, their senses heightened. The deeper they went, the more unnerving the feeling became. It wasn't just the threat of immediate danger. They were being watched. They could feel it. And then, it happened again. The earth split open, and a shockwave sent them all sprawling to the ground. This time, however, it was different. The surge of energy didn't just come from the planet. It seemed to rise up, surrounding them in an almost tangible force. The soldiers' equipment went haywire, their weapons emitting erratic signals. Some of their radios crackled with static, while others completely shut down. "What the hell is going on?" shouted Lyran, the council engineer, as he struggled to regain control of his gear. This is not possible. These energy signatures, there. Before he could finish, a massive form rose from the ground. The soldiers froze in place, their weapons aimed at the new threat, their eyes wide with disbelief. The thing that emerged was like nothing they had ever seen, nothing that could be classified in any known database. It was a towering figure, its body formed of dark stone and crackling energy. The air around it seemed to distort, bending unnaturally as if the very fabric of reality was warping to accommodate its presence. The ground shook violently as the creature stepped forward, each massive footfall sending a shockwave rippling through the ground. It was monstrous, not just in size, but in the way it emanated an overwhelming sense of ancient power. The soldiers' weapons, powerful enough to tear through entire fleets, fired upon it, but the projectiles bounced harmlessly off its form, like raindrops against a mountain. "This is impossible," one of the soldiers screamed in terror. "How do we fight this?" Rin's mind raced as the creature loomed closer, its glowing eyes fixated on the group. This wasn't just some kind of defense system. It was something far older, a being from the depths of the planet itself. Something had awakened, and it wasn't just the planet's energy. It was a force of nature, far beyond anything the Council had ever anticipated. As the creature took another step, the energy around it began to warp even further, twisting the very air. Rin's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the pressure building, the force of the energy pushing against him, making it hard to breathe, to think. "Captain, we need to get out of here," Lyran shouted. "We can't stop this. It's too powerful." But Rin didn't move. His eyes were locked on the creature, and for a moment, time seemed slow. The creature was aware of them, but it didn't attack. Instead, it simply stood there, towering over them, radiating an ancient power that seemed to come from the very heart of Earth itself. It wasn't just a mindless force. It was alive, sentient, and aware. Rin's mind was spinning. The Council had feared humanity for their technological advancements, their potential. But this creature, it wasn't human. It wasn't even close. It was something else entirely. Something ancient. Something that had been sealed away beneath Earth's surface for reasons no one understood. Suddenly, a voice echoed through Rin's mind, cutting through the confusion. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense. It was more like a deep, resonating thought that reverberated inside his skull. "You dare to invade. You dare to wake us." The voice was not spoken aloud, but it was as clear as day in Rin's mind. It was a voice that carried the weight of millennia, the power of something that had been dormant for far too long. And it wasn't just the creature speaking. It was the planet itself, the force that had shaped Earth for centuries. The soldiers froze, their weapons still raised, but none dared to fire. They were paralyzed, not by fear alone, but by the realization that they were facing something far beyond their understanding. "We didn't know," Rin muttered, his voice barely a whisper, though he wasn't sure who he was speaking to anymore. "We didn't know what Earth had, what it had been hiding." As the voice echoed in his mind again, Rin felt the weight of it settle on him. The Council had made a grave mistake. They had feared humanity's rise in the galaxy. But now, They were learning the hard truth. Earth had been hiding far more than they had ever imagined. And the real danger wasn't humanity. It was what they had unleashed in their attempt to conquer this planet. "We are not the monsters here," Rin thought, his voice barely audible. "You are." And as the creature took another step forward, its form flickering with energy, Rin knew that the Council's plan was about to fail. What they had feared was nothing compared to the true power of Earth. The galaxy would learn soon enough. The real monsters were not the humans, but the ancient beings that had lain dormant beneath their feet for eons. And now, they were awake. The creature continued to advance, its massive form looming over the soldiers like a shadow that could not be outrun. The ground beneath them cracked and rumbled with each of its steps, and the energy it radiated was almost unbearable. It wasn't just physical. It was a force that seemed to seep into their minds, clouding their thoughts, distorting their perception of reality. Rin could feel the pressure building in his skull, like a vice slowly tightening. "Captain," one of the soldiers cried out, their voice shaky with fear. "We can't fight this thing. We have to retreat." Rin stood frozen, his gaze locked on the towering figure before him. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had been part of the Galactic Council's elite strike force, trained to deal with threats far more advanced than anything humanity could muster. But this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The sheer power of the creature, the very presence of it, was overwhelming. "Retreat," Rin whispered under his breath. "There is no retreat." Lyran, the Zorax engineer who had been by his side throughout the mission, took a step forward, his expression one of pure disbelief. This is impossible. We've never encountered anything like this. The Council will never believe us." "How could they?" Rin clenched his fists, the weight of the truth settling on his shoulders. "We'll make them believe." The creature's glowing eyes, like twin pools of liquid fire, focused on Rin. The energy that had been emanating from it intensified, a wave of power that seemed to surge toward them. It wasn't just a physical force. It was as though the creature itself was communicating, or perhaps testing them. Rin could feel it in his bones, the unspoken challenge that had been laid before them. "Captain," Lyran said, his voice trembling, "this is no longer about the mission. It's about survival. We need to get out of here." But Rin couldn't bring himself to move. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was something bigger, something that transcended his orders, his mission. The planet beneath him was alive. He could feel it, the deep pulse of something ancient and powerful that had been hidden for so long. The creature, the force beneath the Earth, it wasn't just protecting humanity. It was protecting Earth itself. "We're not here to conquer," Rin said, his voice firm. "We're here to understand. And right now, we need to understand what this force is." The creature loomed ever closer, its energy swirling around them, pushing and pulling at the fabric of reality itself. As it came closer, Rin felt an unsettling connection, as though the creature was not just a guardian, but a being that had been waiting for them, waiting for someone to uncover the truth that Earth had kept hidden for eons. Suddenly, a low rumble reverberated through the ground, and the creature stopped in its tracks. The air went still, and for a moment, it felt as though time itself had frozen. The voice that had echoed through Rin's mind earlier returned, this time more forceful, more pronounced. "You awaken us." The voice was powerful, resonating through Rin's skull with an intensity that made him stagger. He clutched his head, his vision blurring. He had no idea how the creature was communicating, but the words cut through him like a blade. "We didn't mean to," Rin replied, his voice strained. "We just wanted to understand what was happening. We didn't know. You did not know, and yet you awakened us. You dare to call upon forces you do not comprehend." The voice was filled with an ancient, overwhelming anger, but beneath it, Rin could sense something else, something older. The voice was more than a warning. It was a cry of release, of long-forgotten power, stirred from its slumber. The ground trembled again, and suddenly, Rin's team was thrown to the ground as another massive energy surge erupted from the earth. The creature moved again, but this time, it wasn't just a single figure. As Rin looked around, the earth itself seemed to be cracking open, as though the planet was revealing its deepest secrets. More forms emerged from the cracks. Tall, towering figures made of rock and energy, each more powerful than the last. "Captain," Lyran shouted as he stumbled to his feet. "What is happening? This is beyond anything we can control." Rin's mind raced. The creature, the force that had been hidden beneath Earth's surface for so long, was not just a protector, it was something more. A defense system, perhaps, but what it had unleashed was something far greater. It was as though the planet itself had a consciousness, a will, and it had been waiting for someone to trigger its awakening. Humanity, despite its technological advances, had no idea what it had just uncovered. They had awakened a force that was not just ancient, it was beyond comprehension. "Fall back," Rin shouted to his team. "We need to warn the fleet. This is no longer just about conquering Earth. This is about understanding what we've unleashed." But it was too late. The creatures, born of the planet's energy, were already moving toward them. They weren't just walking. They were gliding, shifting through the air with terrifying speed. The ground beneath their feet buckled and cracked, and a massive energy field shot up, surrounding them in a protective barrier. The creatures stopped just outside of it, their glowing eyes fixated on Rin and his team. "Humans," the voice boomed inside Rin's mind again. "You are not the invaders here. You have unleashed what should have remained buried. And now you will face the consequences." Rin's heart pounded in his chest. This was no longer a mission to understand Earth's technology. It was a battle for survival. And Earth, it seemed, had decided that humanity was not the real threat. The true monsters were those who had dared to awaken something so old, so powerful, that they were no longer in control. The Galactic Council had feared humanity's rise in the galaxy, but they had no idea what lay hidden beneath Earth's surface, a force far greater than anything they had ever encountered. And now, the consequences of their arrogance were unfolding, one terrifying moment at a time. Rin stood frozen, realizing the truth. Humanity was not the monster here. The real monster was the planet itself, and its ancient guardians. And now, it was humanity that would have to face the wrath of Earth's deepest secrets. The ground beneath Rin and his team seemed to pulse with a life of its own as the creatures, now fully emerged from the depths of the planet, circled them. The immense energy field that had surrounded them held the creatures at bay, but it was clear that this was not a permanent solution. They could only hold their ground for so long before the force of the creatures' power would shatter the field. Rin's mind raced. He had never experienced anything like this before. The Council had feared humanity, but now they were learning a far more terrifying truth. Earth was not just a planet. It was a living, breathing entity, and it had its own guardians. Guardians that had been lying in wait, hidden beneath the surface for millennia. The creatures weren't just here to protect the planet. They were here to defend it from anything, or anyone, who threatened it. "We need to think fast," Lyran said, his voice strained with fear. "The energy field won't hold for much longer. If we don't act, we're dead." Rin nodded, his mind still trying to process everything that was happening. This was beyond anything he could have imagined. The Council had warned them about Earth's potential defenses, but they had never prepared for this. They had underestimated the power of the planet's ancient guardians, and now they were paying the price. The creatures, towering over them, stared with cold, unblinking eyes. They made no move to attack, yet it was as if they were waiting for something. Rin couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a fight for survival. This was a reckoning. "Captain, we can't just stand here," one of the soldiers shouted. "We need to figure out a way to disable these creatures, or we'll be trapped here forever." Rin's gaze shifted from the glowing eyes of the creatures to the cracks in the earth around them. The energy surges that had been increasing in frequency earlier were now almost constant, pulsing through the ground with an intensity that made his teeth rattle. There was something more here, something that could be their key to survival. Lyran, Rin said, turning to the engineer, is there anything we can do to tap into the energy from the planet itself? Anything that might give us an advantage? Lyran's face was pale, but he seemed to be thinking, his mind working through the possibilities. I don't know. The energy signatures are unlike anything I've ever seen. But if we can get close to the source, we might be able to tap into it, use it against them. But it's risky. It could backfire, and we might end up making things worse. Rin glanced at the creatures once more. The energy field around them was beginning to flicker, and the creatures' movements were becoming more deliberate. They were preparing for something, and Rin didn't want to find out what that was. He made up his mind. We don't have a choice, Rin said, his voice steely. We need to go in. We need to find the source of this energy and turn it against them. The soldiers looked uncertain, but Rin could see the resolve in their eyes. They knew the stakes. If they didn't act now, they would never get another chance. Get ready, Rin ordered, motioning for the team to advance. We're going in. The energy field flickered one last time, and the creatures stepped forward, their massive feet shaking the ground with each step. They were closing in, but Rin and his team didn't hesitate. They moved with purpose, pushing forward into the ruins of the city. The energy around them seemed to grow stronger, the air thick with static, as if the planet itself was alive with power. The further they went, the more oppressive the feeling became. It was as though they were walking deeper into the heart of something ancient, something that was not meant to be disturbed. As they approached the center of the ruins, Rin saw it. In the distance, a massive structure stood, half buried beneath the earth, but unmistakable in its grandeur. The energy surges seemed to be emanating from it, the very core of the planet's power. The creatures were still behind them, watching their every move, but they hadn't yet attacked. It was as though the creatures knew that Rin and his team were headed toward the source, and they were content to wait. Lyran, can we get close enough to that structure? Rin asked, his eyes fixed on the massive stone structure in the distance. Can we tap into its energy? Lyran didn't answer immediately. He was too busy analyzing the data coming from his equipment, his fingers flying over the controls as he tried to make sense of the strange energy signatures. Finally, he looked up, his expression grim. It's risky, he said. The energy signatures are fluctuating. If we're not careful, we could trigger a chain reaction that. I know, Rin interrupted. We don't have time for a second opinion. We need to act now. The team pushed forward, closing the distance between them and the ancient structure. The closer they got, the more intense the energy became. It felt like they were walking into the heart of a storm, the air thick with an electric charge. The creatures, still watching, remained motionless, but their presence seemed to hang over the team like a dark cloud. Rin's heart pounded in his chest as they reached the base of the structure. The energy surged around them, wrapping around their bodies like a living thing. Rin could feel it now, the pulse of the planet, deep beneath the surface, a rhythm that had been sleeping for centuries. This is it, Rin said, his voice barely a whisper. We have to connect to it. Lyran nodded, his face tense as he worked to interface with the structure. His fingers flew over the controls, and then, without warning, he activated a sequence that sent a ripple of energy through the air. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, the ground beneath them shook violently, and a massive surge of power shot upward, colliding with the energy field that surrounded the creatures. The creatures let out a deep, resonating roar, their eyes glowing brighter than before. The energy field holding them back began to collapse, flickering as the power from the structure surged through it. Rin's breath caught in his throat. This was their chance, but it would only last for a moment. They had to act fast, before the creatures could react. Rin's mind raced as the energy from the ancient structure flowed through the air, crackling with power. The creatures began to react, their massive forms shifting, their glowing eyes locking onto the team. The energy field around them was failing. He could see it flickering, weakening with every passing second. The creatures were no longer standing still. They were preparing to attack. "Lyran, we need to move," Rin shouted, his voice urgent. "If this energy field collapses, we'll be sitting ducks." Lyran didn't need to be told twice. He quickly adjusted the controls, trying to stabilize the energy surges as best as he could. But the feedback was too powerful, the fluctuations too intense. Every time he tried to redirect the energy, it seemed to recoil, pushing him back. Rin could see the strain on his face, the sweat beading on his forehead as he struggled to keep things under control. "Come on, Lyran, we don't have much time," Rin urged. The creatures had now started to move toward them. The ground trembled beneath their steps, and Rin could feel the vibrations through his boots. They were getting closer, faster. The energy surge was not only disrupting the creatures, but also distorting the space around them. Time seemed to slow, the air growing thick, as if they were caught in a dream. Rin's pulse quickened. He knew they had only moments before the creatures overwhelmed them, and Lyran was running out of time to stabilize the field. With a quick glance at the advancing monsters, Rin made a snap decision. "Team, fall back. We need to get out of here now," Rin barked. But Lyran hesitated. "Wait. I need another minute. The energies." "Lyran, it's too dangerous." Rin cut him off, grabbing the engineer's arm and pulling him back toward the cover of a nearby stone structure. "If we don't leave now, we're finished." Lyran's eyes widened, realizing the urgency of the situation. He cursed under his breath, but didn't argue. The team followed Rin's command, retreating quickly, moving as a unit while the creatures loomed closer. The ground continued to shake, and the energy surge rippled through the air, disorienting them. It was becoming harder to keep track of where the creatures were, as the vibrations created a distorted field around them. Rin's breath was shallow, his heart pounding. They had no idea what would happen once the creatures reached them, but one thing was certain: they couldn't outrun them. Earth had awakened something powerful, something more terrifying than they could have ever anticipated. "We have to find a way to turn the tide," Rin muttered to himself, his eyes darting around as he searched for a way out. Lyran's voice was full of panic. "Captain, I'm trying to stabilize the energy, but it's getting worse. The creatures are drawing from it. If they get too close, they'll be able to." Before Lyran could finish, a deafening roar split the air, cutting him off. One of the creatures, its body made of jagged rock and energy, charged toward them with terrifying speed. Rin's pulse spiked. The energy barrier had already weakened, and the creature was closing in faster than they could react. "Move, move, move," Rin shouted, pushing the team forward. The soldiers scattered, dodging the creature's powerful swipes, which shattered the ground as they passed. The creature was relentless, its glowing eyes fixed on them as it pursued. Rin's team was fast, but not fast enough. The creature was gaining on them, its energy surges leaving cracks in the earth, threatening to swallow them whole. Rin gritted his teeth and raised his weapon, aiming it at the creature. But he knew it was futile. Their weapons were no match for this. They needed something bigger, something stronger. But what? What could they possibly do against a force that was not only stronger than them, but also tied to the very heart of the planet? "Lyran, do you have anything?" Rin called out, his voice tight with desperation. Lyran, still working frantically on his equipment, looked up with a wild expression. I might be able to tap into the energy directly, but it's a long shot. If I can get close enough to the source, I can overload the system and disrupt the creature's power." Rin's eyes widened. This was their only shot. "Do it, but you have to move fast." Lyran nodded, determination flooding his face as he began to race toward the source of the energy. But just as he took a step forward, the creature lunged at him with a speed that took them all by surprise. Without thinking, Rin pushed Lyran out of the way, taking the full brunt of the creature's strike. The impact threw him to the ground, and the air was knocked from his lungs. His vision blurred for a moment, and he felt the crushing weight of the creature's energy pressing down on him. But he couldn't afford to stay down. He couldn't let Lyran, or anyone, die because of his failure. Summoning every ounce of strength, Rin pushed himself to his feet. His breath was ragged, but his eyes locked onto Lyran, who was still moving toward the energy source. The creature was now turning its attention to Rin, and he knew he didn't have much time. "Lyran, get to the source," Rin shouted, barely able to speak through the pain. "I'll hold it off." The team, already regrouping, looked to Rin, but he motioned for them to keep moving. "Go. Now." With a quick glance, Lyran sprinted toward the structure, his eyes focused on the task at hand. The creature was closing in fast, but Rin couldn't back down. This was their last chance. The team was depending on him. Rin raised his weapon again, aiming it at the advancing creature, and with a defiant roar, he charged. The battle for survival had truly begun. The creature, the energy surges, and the awakening of Earth's ancient guardians were all part of a much larger story, a story that humanity was about to understand the hard way. The creature charged at Rin with a terrifying speed, its massive claws reaching out to tear him apart. But Rin, driven by sheer determination, held his ground. The pain in his side was almost unbearable, but he couldn't afford to give in. His team was relying on him to keep the creature distracted long enough for Lyran to tap into the heart of the planet's energy. He raised his weapon, but the creature moved too fast. It struck him hard, sending him sprawling across the cracked ground. His weapon slipped from his hand as he struggled to regain his bearings, but the creature wasn't finished. It moved in for the kill, its massive jaws opening wide, ready to crush him. But then, something unexpected happened. A massive burst of energy erupted from the ground near the ancient structure. Lyran had reached the source of the planet's power. The creatures froze, their bodies convulsing as they were struck by a surge of energy that seemed to emanate from the heart of the Earth itself. Rin could hardly believe what he was seeing. The energy that Lyran had unleashed was causing the creatures to stagger, their movements slowed as if they were being held in place by some unseen force. The air was thick with the hum of power, and for the first time, Rin could feel that the tide was turning in their favor. "Lyran, keep going," Rin shouted, his voice hoarse as he scrambled to his feet. He could see Lyran near the source, his hands moving frantically over the controls as he adjusted the energy output. But the creatures weren't finished yet. They let out a deafening roar, and with renewed fury, they charged forward, their energy surges crackling through the air. The ground shook beneath Rin's feet as the creatures closed in on him. Rin knew he had only seconds to act. He grabbed his weapon from the ground and fired at the approaching creature. The shot connected, but it barely slowed the massive beast. It was clear that their weapons were useless against the sheer force of the creatures. But Rin wasn't about to give up. If there was any chance to survive, it lay in the energy that Lyran had unleashed. With his heart pounding, Rin rushed toward the energy source. He knew he had to get to Lyran, to help him stabilize the power and finish what they had started. The creatures were relentless, but the surge of energy seemed to be having an effect. They were disoriented, their attacks less coordinated. Lyran was working desperately to keep the energy under control, but the fluctuations were growing. The surge was starting to destabilize, and Rin could see the fear in his friend's eyes. "We can't hold it for much longer," Lyran shouted over the chaos. "If we don't shut it down soon, we're going to destroy everything." Rin didn't hesitate. He ran up to Lyran and grabbed his arm. "We don't have a choice. We have to keep pushing it, or these creatures will destroy us all." Lyran nodded, his face pale. He quickly adjusted the controls, focusing all the energy into a concentrated beam that shot up toward the creatures. The force of the blast created a shockwave that rocked the ground, sending the monsters sprawling back as they absorbed the full impact. Their massive forms twisted in agony, the energy forcing them to retreat. Rin's breath was ragged as he watched the creatures stagger. They were weakened, but not yet defeated. The battle was far from over. They had only managed to push them back temporarily. He could hear the creatures growling, regrouping, preparing to launch another assault. "We need to finish this," Rin shouted, his voice strained. He could see the creatures regrouping, their energy flickering as they drew power from the planet itself. Lyran's hands were shaking as he worked the controls again, trying to focus the energy even more. The creatures were starting to adapt, their bodies moving more fluidly as they absorbed the energy surges. They were learning. Rin knew they had to make a final push. This was it. If they didn't act now, they wouldn't get another chance. "Lyran, concentrate all the power into a single burst. We can't let them adapt." Lyran hesitated for a split second, then nodded. He keyed in the command, and a massive surge of energy erupted from the structure. The ground trembled as the energy shot toward the creatures. The force of the blast was like nothing they had ever experienced. The creatures were thrown back, their massive bodies crashing into the earth with such force that the ground shook violently. For a moment, everything went still. The creatures were down, their bodies still and lifeless. The energy around them had dissipated, leaving nothing but silence. Rin's heart was pounding in his chest as he stared at the fallen creatures. Were they truly defeated? Had they won? But then, the ground began to rumble again. The creatures, though motionless, began to stir. It wasn't over yet. "We need to go," Lyran yelled. "They're not done yet." Rin turned to his team, motioning for them to fall back. There was no time to waste. The creatures were getting back up, and if they didn't escape, they would be caught in the next wave of attacks. Rin and his team ran toward their escape route, the ancient structure behind them pulsing with an eerie glow. The creatures followed, but the energy surges were no longer as powerful. They were weakened, and the team had gained enough ground to make their escape. As they reached the safety of their ship, Rin allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had survived. But the battle was far from over. The creatures were still out there, and the planet's true power had only begun to reveal itself. "We've made it," Lyran said, breathing heavily. "But we don't know what's waiting for us next." Rin's eyes locked on the horizon, the planet's surface still glowing with the energy they had unleashed. He didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. Humanity had just uncovered a power far greater than anything they had ever imagined. The true fight had only just begun.